All right, so we're going to do the second half of the sketchbook page. So catch up on the first half of the sketchbook page from yesterday first if you need to do that, and then follow along with me for the second half of the sketchbook page. I'm going to pretend like I didn't do it by putting a blank piece of paper right here. So what I did is I just at the underneath the value scale, I just put the word shading really small because these are shading techniques that we're about to do. Okay. And then the first shading technique is called hatching. So write down the word hatching and then draw a circle. And we're going to turn that circle into what looks like a sphere. Okay, and then write this down. Lines go in one direction. With hatching, it's a textured type of shading that's not blended, and you use lines to create the shading, and you make lines that only go in one direction. And so the way I did that is I kind of curved my lines a little bit to make them kind of look like they go along with the shape of a sphere. And I start with light lines that go kind of far apart so that gives me a light shade. And then down here, I'll go and I'll create a medium shade by adding more lines. The closer your lines are together, the darker the shading is going to look. And again, I'm just doing lines going in one direction, but I'm kind of curving them with the circle so that it starts to look like a sphere. So now I've got lines further apart here, lines closer together here, creating a darker value. And then I'm going to come down lower and I'm going to create even darker of a value by adding more lines. The more lines you add and the closer they are together and the thicker the lines are, the darker your value is going to look. Okay, so if I hold this up closer to the camera, you can see all my lines are going in this one direction, but because they're further apart here and then a little closer together here and even closer together here, it looks like light, medium, dark shading. Does that make sense? So that's your first shading technique that's called hatching, where the lines go in one direction. Okay, so you can work on that. And then I'm just going to start, I'm not going to start the shading yet. I'm just going to start the second shading technique, which is called cross hatching. And that's kind of self-explanatory because it's hatching, but with lines that cross. So with this technique, lines go in two or more directions. Not just two, but you can do lines crossing diagonally as well as perpendicular. So, and I'll show you that. So in this one, its lines go in two or more directions. Okay, so just finish up hatching, and then you can start drawing this for cross hatching. Just see how everybody's doing so I can make sure I'm not moving on too fast for cross hatching. See, there's some people ready for cross hatching, some people still working on hatching. Okay. I'll start with the cross hatching. So basically you can start the same way you did with hatching. I'm going to do my lines in the same direction that I did with just hatching. Start with one direction, right? Then I'm going to cross those lines. And again, I'm going to curve them. I'm going to cross in the opposite direction. So they're perpendicular to one another like this. And that kind of gives me a light shade. But remember, when you shade more lines and you put them closer together and your lines are even thicker, it's going to give you a darker value. So down here, I'm going to do another layer of lines going in one direction and then crossing in the next direction to make it darker. So that gives me a medium shade below the light shade. Then I'm going to do it again Down lower, I'm going to go in one direction, and then I'm going to cross again in the other direction to get a darker shade at the bottom of this sphere. So we're turning our circles into spheres, right? And so that is crossing the lines in two directions. But remember, it could be two or more directions. So if I wanted to, I could also go diagonally. So I did lines going this way, and now I can go in a whole new direction this way if I want to. Oh, disappeared for a second. And that has my lines going in three directions. And then if I go X like this, then I'm going in four directions. And you can kind of go crazy with cross hatching and make your lines go in as many directions as you want, as long as you're keeping it with shading with lines and not blending. Okay, so we don't blend with hatching and cross hatching. And then for our last one, and I'll come around the room, I'm just going to set this up blank to start. And I'll come around the room and give each table some blending stumps. And this is where you blend with either your finger or a blending stump. I prefer using a blending stump over my finger because the tips of the fingers can't get into tiny spaces. And also my hands get so messy when I blend with my fingers. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and let you guys catch up to this point, and then I'm going to pass out some blending stumps. Yes. Go ahead and grab one of each pencil and a blending stump. So there's enough blending stumps on each table for everybody to grab one. Look in the middle of your table and grab a blending stump. Okay. All right, so I put enough blending stumps in the middle of each table. So grab a blending stump for this last one. Okay. And also, if you'd like to, you can do this all with a number 2 pencil, just a regular pencil. Or if you prefer, you can go get an H pencil, any of the H pencils, either H, 2H, or 4H. I think this one's just a H. I don't know, the code got cut off because somebody sharpened it on the wrong end. So this is one of the H pencils. And then I've got a 4B pencil. I also have a ebony pencil. So if you want to go get pencils that vary, you can go do that. Or you can just use your number 2 pencil for this. So for this, because I'm not making lines, I'm blending. Instead of using the pencil like this, I'm holding it differently, like this. And I'm going to use the side of the graphite. And by the way, I keep using the word graphite. This is graphite. This is not lead. A lot of people call this lead, or they call it a lead pencil. If there was lead in pencils, they'd be poisonous. This is actually called graphite. So when you hear me using the word graphite, I'm referring to what a lot of people call lead. Okay. All right, so I am going to start with the side of the graphite like this, and I'm lightly starting this lighter shade here, eventually coming down to pressing harder to create a medium shade. Not using the blending stump yet, but I will. And then down here, I'm pressing even harder to create that darker shade. Okay. All right, so it's nice and dark here at the bottom of the sphere. It comes up medium and then light. Then I can go in and grab my blending stump. And I can start blending very lightly with the light shade. It's going to get a little too dark if you blend hard. So press softly with your lighter shade with the blending stump. Pressing hard is going to make it too dark. Then as you come down to the medium tone, you can press a little harder, and the hardest with the dark value. And then if you feel like it got a little too dark anywhere, you can come in with an eraser and just dot your eraser to lighten up any spots that look a little too dark. Thank you. You can get your portfolio and take out your sketchbook. Okay, I'm lightening up a little bit, and then I'm going to go back in one more time with my blending stump and just kind of blend this out so it looks nice and smooth. So with the blending technique for shading, it gives you a really smooth surface to your whatever object you're shading. So we don't always want to blend. Sometimes we need texture to the, if objects have texture, we don't want a smooth blend, right? But if we're drawing a smooth object, then we're going to use the blending technique and not the textured hatching or cross hatching techniques. Okay. All right. So should look something like this when you're done with this section of the page. Okay. And then when you're done with this, we are going to do a second sketchbook page today. I'm just going to raise this up, see if I can get it to stay so it's a little closer to the camera. Okay. I'll give you a minute to finish up that half of your sketchbook page before we move on to the next shading activity on the next page of your sketchbook. Hold on. Bathrooms are locked. Go to the one across from the gym. It's really smooth, but I don't think it makes so much mistake. Okay, it looks like enough people are done with this that we can move on to the second page, but I'm going to leave up the sketchbook page on the right side of the screen there so that you can continue to finish if you haven't yet. Okay, so for everyone who's done with that sketchbook page, turn your page. You can either, it's your choice. You can use the back of this sheet here, or like you can do what I did, which is leave that page, back of the page blank and move on to the next page. Okay, so this is what we're doing next. You guys are doing the anatomy of a shaded sphere and with labels and everything. Okay, so you can choose to, it's up to you if you want to use the back of that value page that you just did, or if you want to just leave that blank and go on to the next page. Okay. All right, so I'll start fresh here, but this is what it's going to look like when you're done. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to, and this is where you probably want to go get some pencils other than your number 2 pencil. So if you want to just grab one of the H pencils and one of the soft pencils, whether it's a 6B or an ebony, in addition to the blending stump that you have, you can go ahead and do that. Okay. And then when you get back from grabbing pencils, You're going to draw a circle, and this does not have to be perfect. Just freehand it like that, and then you can erase any little extra bits, okay? Freehand a circle as best you can, and it's about the size of the palm of your hand, okay? So see the palm of my hand? It's about that size, okay? So make a circle on your page. We're going to turn this flat circle shape into a shaded 3D looking form, which is called a sphere. We're going to have what would be a light source from up here on the right. So this is our light source. And so the light's going to hit right here, okay? And then you also can draw an arrow here and an arrow here, because all the light is going to be hitting this part of our sphere right here, okay? And then we're going to start shadow where the arrows stop here and here. That's where our shadow is going to start. But first, I want you to just lightly, and I mean really, really lightly, right here where this middle arrow is, create a very small light circle, which we don't want the line of this circle showing when we're done. We want it to be shaded away. But this circle right here is not going to get shaded at all. This is our highlight right here, okay? So that inside this circle is going to be no shading at all. It's going to be the white ground of the paper showing, so that you've got a total highlight right there where the light hits the ball the most, right? And then you can also create what's going to become a cast shadow. So you're going to draw what's called an ellipse. It's not a circle. It's more like an oval that comes from the ball like this. Okay, so it's not a circle. See how it's a circle squished down, which is called an ellipse. Okay, and it comes from about right here and it goes to about right here. Because our light comes this way, there's going to be what's called a cast shadow that is cast from the ball where the light can't reach. So if the ball is sitting on a table, say this is the table that it's sitting on, then the shadow is being cast onto the table. Okay. All right, and then you can start shading. And if you want to start with a light, harder pencil, you can do that. And it's up to you if you want to start shading with hatching, cross hatching, or if you want this to be a smooth blended sphere. That's up to you, because we have practiced all the techniques now. So go ahead and choose which technique you like. I'm going to choose the blended smooth technique, and I'm using my hard pencil very lightly around that highlight that I had made. And hopefully by doing that, I'm like making that line around the highlight that I made initially disappear, because you don't want a line around your highlight. You just want it to, yeah. So I'm just going to use an eraser and like lightly dot around the line that I drew to make that line disappear. And it'll just be more faded into this light shadow. Okay. All right. So that's good. So that's going to be the lightest shadow there. Then I'm going to move on to my 2B regular pencil, and I'm going to just start making it slightly, it's still going to be light. It's a little too dark in that spot. That's okay. It's still going to be light, but it's going to just be the slightest bit darker around here. I haven't used the blending stump yet. I'll use that after I'm done. So right now we're creating a mid-tone shadow. This is a mid-tone. Okay, and then I'm going to move on to a softer pencil. So I think I'll use the 6B pencil. And now I'm going to create the core shadow. This is going to be the darkest part of the sphere. because the light is not hitting here. Okay, and I'm actually gonna before I fill it all the way in, I'm gonna lighten it up at the edge here because we're gonna have what's called reflected light on this back bottom part of the sphere. So I'm not gonna shade too dark right in this spot. But at this point, I'll come in with my blending stump. I'm gonna start with the darkest part first. So this is my core shadow, this dark section, and I'm gonna start blending the mid-tone. And then really lightly, I'm just gonna slightly blend the um, light shadow around the highlight. Okay, and then right here, we've got this little section which I can use an eraser for that is called the reflected light area. And that happens because when light hits the table, it reflects back up onto the ball and creates a slight highlight right here. You would think that this would be the darkest area of shadow because it's the furthest away from the light. But because light bounces and reflects, it reflects back up from the table onto the sphere right there. And then I'm going to use either ebony or 6B pencil again, and we're going to make a really dark cast shadow. The cast shadow right under the ball is super, super dark. So you want to use one of your soft pencils and press hard, leaving that little area of reflected light. Now that reflected light area is not going to be white. It's still shaded. It's just lighter than the core shadow. So I'm shading it in a little bit more because I just erased a little too much of it. Okay. And against the cast shadow, you can really see that reflected light, even though it's shaded in a little bit and it's not white. Okay. And then the cast shadow actually, it stays pretty dark, but it gets a little lighter as it comes further away from the ball. So it's going to be darkest right here under the ball. And it's going to stay dark, but it's not going to be quite as dark as you come out. Fill in this whole space because it's the same shape as the ball, just squished into an ellipse. Okay, and then I can use my blending stump on this. Okay, and then I can just label everything. So this is the cast shadow down here. We've got the highlight here. We've got mid-tone. And we've got core shadow. Okay, and then I'll raise this up so you can see that a little clearer. Oh, I forgot to label the reflected light. Let me do that. if I can get that glare to go away. That's better. Okay, so you've got some time to finish up both of your sketchbook pages. So the on the right side of the screen, you're looking at your first sketchbook page that we started yesterday and finished today. And then on the left side of the screen, you're looking at your second sketchbook page. And both of those should be finished in the next 10 minutes. Okay? Yeah, and feel free to take a picture of the screen if you feel like you're a little behind and you're going to need to finish this um, tomorrow or during lunch or something like that.